as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
We start? This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, September 21st, 2021 to be deferred. Honorable Leader of Government's Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The questions that the said minutes be deferred. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. The said minutes are deferred.
Announcements by Your Honor the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency the Governor General, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, reports from select committees, first readings of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of today's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business.
Government business is the order of the day. Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Constitution Amendment Bill, which notice was given on the 20th of September 2021, be substituted with the newly revised bill dated the 27th of September 2021. The revised bill has already been circulated to members, Mr. Speaker.
The question is that the Constitutional Amendment Bill, the previous Constitution Amendment Bill, be substituted for the current bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honorable Prime Minister, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2021.
Honorable Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise with the honor, Mr. Speaker, of being able to move the second reading of this constitutional amendment bill, which quite simply seeks to do just four things. One, to revoke the Barbados Independence Order of 1966 as an order in council of Her Majesty, while saving and keeping complete the Barbados Constitution, which existed only as a schedule to that order hitherto. Two, to make provision for a Barbadian to be a head of state of Barbados. Three, to change the oath of allegiance from that to Her Majesty to now the state of Barbados. And fourthly, to ensure continuity in all of the other aspects and functioning of the state of Barbados through all of the offices, appointments, commissions, and everything flowing from the prerogative that was hitherto exercised in the conduct of the affairs of this country, while at the same time vesting all that previously was vested in the Crown, now in the state of Barbados. This is a very simple bill in its terms, but a fundamental bill in its action and intent. This is a bill that allows us to say to the world that we, Barbadians, as we move to celebrate the 55th anniversary of nationhood, would want to complete the process and to build on that which was done by those who went before. It is in no way intended to take away from the work of the father of independence, or indeed the father of democracy before, because without the right to vote and the capacity to control our destiny, we would not have been able to become independent. But what it does is to allow us to close the circle with respect to independence and to move to another state of our development, thereby allowing Barbadians to say to the world that we have the confidence in ourselves to be completely responsible for who we are and what we do and what we say and all that surrounds itself with the nation of Barbados. This is an acknowledgement of the prescience and indeed leadership of those who went before in previous parliaments, starting of course with the Right Excellent Errol Walton Barrow, who was responsible for the acclamation that we went forward with respect to independence on the 30th of November. And we believe that just as this country was able to, with confidence, take that step, that what remains now for us to do in terms of both the symbolism but also the reality of the actions is something that is entirely within our province and something for which there ought to be a simple, natural step. Mr. Speaker, somewhere across this land, there are little boys and girls who live out their dreams and think about what they want to be when they grow up. And we would want, as a parliament, that among those boys and girls, there should be a legitimate ambition to be the head of state of this nation. It is no different in the United States of America. It is no different in Brazil. It is no different in many other countries across the world. It is no different in Ghana. It's no different in Kenya. We would want, similarly, for a Barbadian boy or girl to believe that they can, in their own right, in their own skin, in their own country, be equal to the task of being head of state of their nation. And we say this without any rancor, because we accept that since modern settlement in 1625, the head of state has been the monarch of the United Kingdom. And that has had its own torturous journey. But we accept that in recent times, our relationship has been one that has been based on mutual respect and that has seen us work collaboratively and with respect, as I said, with the monarch. In this particular instance, we are particularly thankful and extend our courtesies, all courtesies and gratitude to Her Majesty the Queen. But there comes a point in the life of a nation when time simply has come. And we believe that that time has come in our nation effectively, while not being matched by the legal and constitutional arrangements of our nation. And it is against that background, therefore, that this government has taken the determination, has taken the decision that the time has come for us now to complete that process. Mr. Speaker, this bill that is before us recognizes that the Barbados Independence Order of 1966, which flowed from the legislation thereto, had as its schedule the Constitution of Barbados. And the truth is that many people, when going to look for it, might well have been confused because of the fact that our Constitution, like that of many other Caribbean Commonwealth countries, was simply the schedule to an ordering council made by Her Majesty, and not a standalone piece of legislation as we have been accustomed to doing in every other instance. This bill today repeals that Barbados Independence Order, while preserving the schedule, which is the Constitution, as the Constitution. And we took the deliberate act of ensuring that we had broad consultation from a legal perspective. There were different views. And in the end, the Honorable Attorney General and myself would have requested an opinion from the former Chief Justice, Sir David Simmons, and the former President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Sir Dennis Byron, who by a quirk of circumstances happens to be in Barbados today as we debate this bill. Their view, like those of Mr. Justice Sherman Moore, who was responsible for the drafting of this legislation, is that this entirely works in a manner that allows us to repeal and preserve, while at the same time allowing the government to remain committed to our intent to start the work on a new constitution from January of next year. And what do we mean by that? I've said before in other places that the government will ensure that there will be the most comprehensive consultation, not just by having a bill that may be 150 pages and giving it to somebody for 2 or 3 months without guidance, but a consultation that goes chapter by chapter by chapter by chapter, because that is exactly how our Constitution is written, as you know, Mr. Speaker. And the first set of the chapters deal with the fundamental rights and freedoms. We believe that a new Constitution should deal with fundamental rights, freedoms, and responsibilities, because at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to build a nation where active citizenship is the hallmark of that nation. And if that is to be the hallmark of the nation, then it ought to be reflected in the terms and content of the Constitution. But that process is for next year. And that process will see the kind of consultation that we saw with the Thorne Commission, which, as you know, went around this country, almost every parish, speaking to Barbadians with respect to the content thereto of what our local governance systems should be developed and evolved to reflect. And to that extent, it is that similar type of process that we expect to take place next year. Mr. Speaker, we believe that that is where the effective and real consultation will lie. With respect to this bill, as I said, this bill does nothing else but seek to make a Bajan the head of state of Barbados. And it is as simple as that, because that is the lacuna that will take us from one point to the other. By also revoking the order in council, we make the clear statement that we want to be in control of our affairs as a republic. We do not intend, and as a parliamentary republic, we do not intend for this country's name to change. We've made that absolutely clear. The other members of the government have made it clear that the name of Barbados remains Barbados. And we don't need to change our name in order to be able to advance in the process of independence. Similarly, we're not changing the date of independence because we don't see this as anything other than a complete continuum to what was started first in 1950 with the right to vote and the passage of the Universal Adult Franchise Bill, then with the Act of Independence in 1966, and now with the act of making a Barbadian the head of state and removing our constitution from the status of being a schedule to a British order in council. Mr. Speaker, these are therefore simple things that we believe that are necessary at this point. And what we want to be able to do is to ensure that just on December 1st, 1966, saw this nation rise united as we greeted the world as the newest independent state on December 1st, 1966, that we equally want to have a situation where this country closes that process in a dignified manner, places its own national as its head of state, separates in a dignified manner from Her Majesty the Queen, with gratitude for her role in post-independence Barbados for sure, but recognizing that without that, we will continue always to have doubts in the minds of our people as to whether we are truly independent and whether we are truly in charge of our own destiny. Because if we have to send to the palace in order to confer honors, or we have to send to the palace in order to appoint an ambassador to a non-Commonwealth country, then, Mr. Speaker, we do not and cannot say that all power resides and locates within the nation state of Barbados. And it is as simple as that. It's not a lot of long talk, it's not a lot of long action, but it is simply making sure that in the same way on other aspects of our governance, we can make the decisions fully within the geographical jurisdiction of Barbados. We want so to be able to do so on all of our actions and not just the majority. Mr. Speaker, it therefore, as I said, is a matter first of fundamental pride. And if you go back to where this government stands, we in the establishment and in the publication of, our Covenant of Hope, made it very clear, the document that speaks to who we are, what we stand for, and what we will fight for. In 2016, when this Barbados Labour Party in opposition settled the Covenant of Hope, we recognized that the boosting of our country's self-confidence and national identity is the foundation from which all other things spring, including that sense of confidence that will affect how we look at ourselves in the mirror, whether we love who we see, how we treat one another in our families, in our communities, in our country, whether we are prepared to work to higher levels in terms of productivity. All of these things come back fundamentally to the type of person who we are and our sense of self-confidence, our self-esteem, our ability to rise above and to recognize that this is who we are. And you hear me say that all the time because the essence of being Barbadian matters. The essence of being Barbadian separates us from others. The essence of being Barbadian allows us to want to pursue those things that we believe to be intrinsic to the nation state of Barbados. The recognition that we want to stand up for something, particularly when it comes to fighting against injustice and to fighting for social justice. We want to make sure that this country forever recognizes that a person should not be condemned simply because of the circumstances of their birth, and that there should be no office outside of their reach, not even the head of state of this country, in terms of their aspirations and their achievements. Mr. Speaker, we believe this to be fundamental to this nation, and if we are to give our children the opportunity to be global citizens anchored by Barbadian roots, that they must have that confidence that they can be all that they want to be, so long as they're prepared to be the best that they can be. Mr. Speaker, it is fundamental. I served as Minister of Education in this country for 7 years, and regrettably, I've seen too many examples where people are doubting themselves and doubting their capacity, and they carry it with them throughout their entire lives. And very often when you look at somebody in their 50s or 60s and you start to deconstruct what is really the issue when they're going through a difficult time, it goes back to that sense of self-doubt and that sense of, did somebody really love me? Did somebody really accept me? All of those things. And Mr. Speaker, I say so conscious that that determines the level of output and the level of gentility and the level of compassion and the level of all of the things that are necessary to make us a successful society, a great civilization. We believe always that we should speak truth to power. So when people ask me, well, how do you go to the United Nations and say what you say? Aren't you frightened? Mr. Speaker, friends of all, satellites of none. It wasn't just a statement from Mr. Barra. It was a reflection of the essence of who Barbadians are. Let us deal also with the whole question of education. This government's first act, one of them, was to be able to literally give our young people the assurance that we would not limit their horizons by refusing to pay for free for their tertiary education and post-secondary education in this country. And we felt that it was critical to do so because we know from generations that the most important gift that a parent could ensure that their child receives in this country is the right to an education, because more often than not, that education would secure that child's path throughout their life and their capacity to be able to be the best that they can be. Mr. Speaker, these things are intrinsic to who we are as a Barbadian, and therefore we feel that this process of completing the circle is but the natural step that this generation, particularly those of us born at the time of independence, who carry no doubts about why we should be independent, who have no doubts about the correctness of the decision made in 1966, we feel we have an obligation to close the circle. And Mr. Speaker, I've said many times about closing the circle of enfranchisement. And why? Because in 1937, when we had the rebellion, not the riots, but the rebellion that basically said that Barbadians wanted to claim their own destiny, that was the step that sought to build on the work before of Charles Duncan O'Neill and others who tried. And when Marcus Garvey came here in the 1920s, that started to build on the whole act of political organization and political mobilization so that ordinary people could have control of their destiny in a way that was not being appreciated or agreed to by the then British colonial government and the colonial office. Mr. Speaker, that rebellion made it possible for us to push past in a cataclysmic way almost, such that it led forces to form the first political party, the one that I have the distinct honor to lead. And that political party started in March 1938, less than 1 year after that rebellion, making it absolutely clear that it was a direct expression of the uprising that took place hitherto in July 26, on July 26 of 1937. That by March 31st, 1938, less than a stone's throw away at Martineau House on Bay Street, that event took place less than a stone's throw away from Golden Square is of significance for me and in the recognition of the journey that we are taking. There are some who felt that it was inappropriate for me to speak on July 26 this year and to lay out what government's role and roadmap would be with respect to the election of a Barbadian head of state. I disagree, and humbly so. And I disagree humbly so because the journey of modern Barbados, in my view, can be anchored back to that rebellion in 1937. It was not led by people of any formal organized movement, but it was led by people who understood the voice and the call of Clement Payne, Right Excellent Clement Payne, understood the agitation that was taking place before by the Right Excellent Charles Duncan O'Neill and others on the ground, Colonel Wickham in his writings. There's a whole cast of persons understood the work and the courage of people like Israel Lovell and a whole host of others that I'm sure that the member for St. Michael East will reflect and place appropriately into the records of this House. That is why we made July 26 a day of national significance. And that is why we also moved to expunge the criminal convictions of those convicted with that event. Because we understood that that was the defining moment that led then to what I call now the journey of enfranchisement. In 1938, March 31st, you have the establishment of the Barbados Labour Party, then known as the Barbados Progressive League, then gone back to the Barbados Labour Party again. You then had in 1941, and I believe that the Honourable Member for St. George North will have the opportunity to speak to this because they too will be celebrating the 80th anniversary of the Barbados Workers' Union's formation in less than a week. Less than a week, next Monday, the 4th of October. And Mr. Speaker, that process then led not just to the political enfranchisement with the Barbados Labour Party, but then the workers' enfranchisement was then becoming possible with the establishment of the Barbados Workers' Union. We then start to talk about the enfranchisement, of persons with respect to the right to vote. The passage of the Universal Adult Suffrage Bill in 1950, allowing for the first time in 1951 people to vote in this country without reference to any kind of property. I didn't refer specifically to the right of women to vote in 1945, but that enfranchisement was also critical. The problem was that was still anchored to property. And by 1950, when Sir Grantley led the bill, it gave for the first time all Barbadians over the age of 21 the right to vote in this nation. That age was subsequently reduced to 18. But the enfranchisement didn't end there. We then went to the process of enfranchising people with respect to their workers' rights and social rights. And that is what the 1950s came to be recognized as, because you had then the passage of the labor legislation, holidays with pay. You had a whole suite of labor legislation that sought to protect workers who, for regrettably centuries, were just seen as beasts of burden in this nation, and were brought here purely for their labor and not for any other consideration, regrettably. We then saw equally in the 1950s the process of wanting to provide education and health care in this country. And I thank God that we have had successive governments that have treated to this as a continuum. So the construction of West St. Joseph, now known as Grantley Adams School, the construction of Princess Margaret School, the construction of Parkinson School, the construction of what was then known as Richmond School, now known as St. Leonard School. Those 4 secondary schools, newer secondary schools, were all constructed in the 1950s in order to be able to expand the capacity, because while this country had in 1900 over 200 primary schools on 166 square miles, it only had 6 secondary schools at that point, thereby making it very difficult for persons to move beyond a 7th grade education, 7th standard education in this country. And Mr. Speaker, once the Right Excellent Errol Barrow won in 1961, he was then able, with the literal writing of a pen, to ensure that every child going to secondary school and primary school in this country would do so free of charge. Understanding that that represented the essence of what Barbadians wanted for their children. And we've never looked back. We've never looked back. We paused in 2013 on post-secondary, but mercifully, the will of the country was sufficient to say we will make other sacrifices and we will make other changes. But what matters to us is that any child born in this nation must believe that they can be the best that they can be. That is how we have a Garfield Sobers. And when people started to make fun at him, they always forget that he has excelled where no other man has gone with respect to what he was able to achieve in cricket globally. And that is why if you call his name now in any part of the Commonwealth, people literally receive his name in awe because they understood his absolute brilliance. But he was born short there in the Bay Land. And if we go to the other side of Bridgetown now, and you look at Robin Rihanna Fenty, she knew from small that she wanted to take on the world. And if you ever doubted it, look at the interview that she did with, I think, was it Katie Couric? When she was about 17 years old. I still remember where she sat. Actually, she had on the same color I got on now. She sat in a off-white outfit in a chair with her legs literally poised and her whole manner focused. And she said, when I build my empire, she didn't say when I am successful in my career. She didn't say when I get through. At 17. And she was dealing with the unfortunate incident of domestic violence. So even after that, she sat there and she told the entire world, when I build my empire. And if I were to be asked to encapsulate why we are really doing this, because I believe that every child born in this nation has the right to those kinds of aspirations. But you can't get it if you are being told that somebody else is going to rule over you by circumstances of birth. But that's the closest thing to a feudal system. You can't get it when somebody else has that right to be over you simply by reason of birth and by conquest. Mr. Speaker, no. Time come. The time truly has come. And it has taken courage. And we're not blind to the fact that there are some who would not want us to make this journey and who don't believe that we are equal to the task. But we believe fundamentally that the majority of Barbadians by far already feel the way that this legislation is now trying to bridge the gap to. The Barbadians already feel effectively that they're in charge of their own destiny. So why do you have then the difference in our legislative and constitutional construct? And that is why I say that as a child of independence, I was born 1 year and 1 month before this country became independent. I have no doubts nor fears, none whatsoever. And I believe that almost every other member of my government feels the exact same way. They have no doubts nor fears. This has been a conversation that has been taking place since December 1998. 1998, indeed, Mr. Speaker, the fact that I was part of the cabinet that agreed to the establishment of this commission explains why I have so much gray hair now. Because it has been a long journey. It has been a long journey. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, one of my greatest regrets is that while there are a few who are still with us, the majority of persons who served on this commission, and in fact the Cox Commission before, have gone to the great beyond. There can be no rush, therefore, about this act. This act has taken long in coming. And if we go back, We agreed that there are aspects that are certainly worthy of consultation, and that is the majority of the work that relates to the Constitution. We get that. And we're committed to that fully. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, when I was Attorney General, I think the current Attorney General will tell you that the work and the much of the work done in that first draft, I would have started along with the then other persons who regrettably are no longer with us. Sir Roy Marshall, who was the drafter of the 1966 Constitution, and who was the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies and also the University of Hull, who was the first chairman of the Commission of Racial Equality, I believe, in the United Kingdom, and a former, as I said, he was advisor to me as Attorney General. Professor Keith Patchett, who was the first Dean of the Cave Hill Law School at the University of the West Indies. Professor Patchett, fortunately, was prepared to work with us in those days. The late Simeon McIntosh, who is no longer with us, a great Grenadian constitutional expert, well known to post-independence Caribbean lawyers, particularly those who attended the same Cave Hill law faculty of the University of the West Indies. Ms. Shirley Bell, who was the Chief Parliamentary Counsel at the time. Mr. Hal Gollop, who in his own right as a member of the private bar at the time. And indeed, Mr. Griffith, who was the Law Reform Commissioner at the time, working in the chambers of the Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, that work was done. It was rested and left there. And it has been there for the better part of 15, 16 years. And the current Attorney General and Mr. Justice Moore have taken it, and they are now seeking to make the amendments that are necessary such that a draft will be ready for consultation come January 2022. There is nothing being done behind the backs of anyone. And to that extent, therefore, I commit the government to that full consultation. But at this stage, this bill is simply about making Abajan the head of state. But because we are also taking back the Constitution and removing it as the schedule to an ordering council, for the avoidance of doubt as well, we also ensure that we provide for continuity in every other aspect, whether it is in the offices or whether it is also in the transfer of land previously held by the Crown, now to be held by the state. Same way that we replace Her Majesty's name in the oath of allegiance with the state, we replace the references to the Crown with the state of Barbados in terms of the possession of land. We also ensure that there is no doubt that enactments which would have passed validly before as part of the laws of Barbados under the old construct are all legitimately preserved under the new construct. So all this does is to say what existed yesterday will exist tomorrow, with the exception of the fact that there is no longer a Governor General. There will be a president, and that president will be elected in the way set out in this legislation. The other thing that we did, we removed the criteria for age, but we've insisted that a Barbadian, the president of Barbados, shall be a Barbadian by birth or by descent. And that is captured at Clause 29. A person is qualified to be nominated for election as president if he is a citizen of Barbados by birth or descent. Ironically, as we discussed in the parliamentary party last night, the Interpretation Act is such that masculine includes feminine, although it should be both feminine and masculine. And I hope that at some point the Attorney General will start drafting also in the feminine and not simply in the masculine, particularly since we are determined and to be able to reflect that kind of parity for those boys and girls going forward. What is clear is that a person is not qualified to be elected to the office of president if they're a member of the House of Assembly or Senate, a sitting member. But if they have left more than 12 months, they can then be eligible for that nomination for election. And there's a reason for that. We felt that there should be a cooling off period. It is not impossible. In a small society, we have limited options very often. But at the same time, we do not rule out a person simply because at some point in their career, they would have expressed openly partisan preferences. The truth is that all of us have preferences. It's just whether we have them openly or whether we keep them to ourselves. And this says clearly there should be a 12-month period before anybody can be eligible to move from this parliament to that office. Similarly, that a person will not be able to be served if they are disqualified under the things that prevent a person from serving in the House of Assembly by Section 44 of the current Constitution. And those, we all know what they are in terms of the things that preclude a person from being able to serve in public life in this Parliament, in terms of if they're bankrupt or if they are not of sound mind, if they certain types of convictions, not all. So those are set out clearly. We're not making any changes to any of that. Similarly, this bill sets out the manner in which the election shall take place, and the Honourable Attorney General shall carry the Honourable House through that procedure so that the country is clear as to the process for that. Mr. Speaker, I have approached the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and he and I met and agreed that we would want to bring the absolute ultimate dignity to this process by ensuring that we do a joint nomination. I did indicate to the country our intention when appropriate and once the legislation passes to be able to nominate Her Excellency, the current Governor General, and with your permission I call her name only for the purposes of our records, Dame Sandra Mason. We believe that she is a fitting nomination for the post of being the first President of Barbados to be elected by this Parliament of Barbados through the separate houses meeting on the same day and collectively, but meeting as separate houses of Parliament. And I am happy to report that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, like myself, agrees that the dignity of the occasion requires this joint effort. There are some things that are simply above partisan considerations in this nation, and long may that be so. I referred to December 1st, 1966 as being one of those days when all of us, regardless of where we stood, recognized that we must now greet and meet the world as one. I believe that this process is of a similar nature, that we accept the honor and dignity of being given the opportunity to be able to play a role in the nomination and subsequent election of the first President of Barbados. And we believe that there is no more fitting person to be nominated than Her Excellency. She, by her circumstances, have shown what it is to rise and to reach the very highest levels in this nation by dint of education, hard work, discipline, respect for God, respect for traditional values, and empathy and compassion that saw her work as a United Nations international advocate for the rights of children, recognizing always that the essence of who we are as Barbadians is to simply make a better life for our people, particularly where persons are vulnerable or disadvantaged. And I want publicly to thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for agreeing that we collectively should set a tone for this that hopefully will inspire others that come after us, that there are simply some things that are above partisan consideration. I reflect equally on the other momentous occasions of state with which I have been involved, And perhaps the greatest other one was when we left Her Majesty's Privy Council as the final Court of Appeal of Barbados and put in place the Caribbean Court of Justice, which I had the honor to chair the preparatory committee towards its establishment for almost 5 years, and towards settling the financial arrangements such that it could become an institution that would stand on its own without the dependence on Caribbean governments on an annual basis to function. On that occasion, Mr. Speaker, the then leader of the opposition was the late Prime Minister, the Honorable David Thompson. And I'm happy to report that on that occasion too, after I spoke to him as the then Attorney General, and then the Prime Minister then spoke to him, that we were able to agree that the Barbados's entry into the Caribbean Court of Justice would be a seamless one, supported by the people of Barbados as reflected by the institutions in Parliament, namely the government and the opposition. And Mr. Speaker, this is what separates this country from many others. And there are many others today that still cannot settle on that fundamental issue of what should be the final court in their land. And when I say to you that sometimes I get emotional for leading a country like this, it is because of that tradition that there are some things that are simply above partisan consideration. And I know it from sitting on both sides of the aisle over the course of the last 30 years, effectively. I didn't celebrate it formally, but the truth is that January of this year would have been 30 years for me in both the lower house and the upper house in the Parliament of Barbados as a member of Parliament. The first 3.5 years being in the Senate, and of course since 1994 with the permission and consent of the people of St. Michael Northeast in this honorable lower house. So I say this because I know that in this relay race, in the same way that we are now running this leg of the relay race that Sir Grantley and the Right Excellent Errol Barrow started in terms of Barbados' modern development, that there will be others who will come after us to run it. And when they come, I hope that our example today, Honourable Leader of the Opposition, and my example as we go through this process will inspire them to remember that there are some things that are simply above partisan consideration. I also say so conscious that there are those who would want us to take partisan decisions as to who we nominate. I am not in that. I am not in that. And I believe that the best person for the job should be that person who we elect as president of the country. And I am satisfied that Her Excellency has comported herself in a way that she enjoys and commands the affection of Barbadian people, and that the majority of Barbadians that I know would want the Leader of the Opposition and myself to do exactly as we are doing. Now, Mr. Speaker, the oath is self-explanatory. And indeed, anyone who has had to take that long oath before would know that it became almost impossible for you to do it without pausing, because there are no punctuation marks, and it was just about, 20 lines, 25 lines straight. And we recognize that that really is not appropriate to the time in which we live. And of course, as I said, the new oath simply will reflect the simple words and the essence of what we want to say as Barbadian office holders. And these oaths are found in the first schedule to the bill, and they simply say that I, and in my case, whatever your name is, in my case it be Mia Amor Motley, do swear that I will well and truly serve Barbados in the office, that I do swear that I will be faithful and loyal to Barbados, and that I will uphold the Constitution and the law. And I further swear that I will conscientiously, impartially, and to the best of my ability discharge my duties. In this case, it would be as Prime Minister, but this is the same oath that ministers, parliamentary secretaries will take. There is a new oath for the President. There is a new oath for the judges. And there is a new oath for the Director of Public Prosecutions. And there's also a new oath for the judges appointed to the Caribbean Court of Justice from here. So that, Mr. Speaker, this is a simple bill, and I shall not detain the House any further. I promised the Leader of the Opposition that I wouldn't speak long. I think he doubted me. But I shall not detain the House any further, because the truth is that, as I said, these things now have to go to other places. And when this bill leaves here, it clearly must go to the Honorable Senate, the Senate. And then, Mr. Speaker, under the legislation, I believe that once the Governor General assents to it, that then there is a requirement that there be letters nominating the person, and that you, Mr. Speaker, will do the equivalent of what in law we call a take notice, which is simply to give notice of the nominations that you have received. In this case, we have already said that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition and myself intend to do a joint nomination, but the law provides as well for any 10 members of the House of Assembly to do a nomination separate from what we may do. And that special gazette that comes out will also set the date for the election of a President of Barbados. We expect this process to take place all within this month of October. And, Mr. Speaker, we therefore look forward to being able to carry it through its various stages in a very deliberate way. At the appropriate time, we will also identify for the country how we intend to deal with this matter of the swearing in of the President. We are conscious that we are in a pandemic, but we are also conscious that life continues within the pandemic. And as I've said to the country in the last month, 6 weeks, this is a marathon now. This is no longer a sprint. And indeed, as we meet with those across the world, whether it is in the WHO or PAHO, or indeed in my role as chair of the Development Committee of the IMF and World Bank, what is clear is that there is no immediate end in sight of a pandemic that is likely to become endemic and just part and parcel of our landscape, for want of a better phrase. Against that backdrop, how we do it will obviously have to change, but what we do must continue, because we do not know when and if ever life will be like how we had it before. That is why we urge Barbadians to be able to protect themselves. And that is why we say to Barbadians that the biggest and best protection is truly the vaccination. We're not going to mandate it, as I said, but what we are saying is that the evidence is clear that what we have now is a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And to that extent, therefore, we need to make sure that as many people who can take it will take it. Ironically, Mr. Speaker, when you look at the numbers, the truth is that we are already at a stage where 58% of those eligible to take the vaccine have taken it. And why do I say so? There is no vaccine that can be used by anybody from being a baby to 12 years old now, just to the point of becoming 12. There's no vaccine. But yet you have about 40-something thousand Barbadians in that category. So when you subtract that from our total, you begin to see that the numbers, the 132,000 people who have taken the vaccine, when taken as a percentage of the eligible population, is in fact far more, and is almost 6 in every 10 Barbadians that have already taken it who are over the age of 12. That is a significant achievement for this country, and while we are not yet where we want to be, we are significantly along the road, and we have a gap that we must close, and I'm satisfied that over the course of the next few weeks, we will close that gap. And I look forward to us working with Barbadians to do that. But I have made the point over and over that this is in fact also our reality, that the reconstruction and recovery from COVID, as I said the other night, is now everyone's business. It's not just the business of the Minister of Health. It's not just the business of the Ministry of Health. It's not just the business of the government of Barbados. It is everyone's business. Just as we had the slogan, tourism is our business, well, the recovery and the reconstruction from COVID is all of our business, Mr. Speaker. And I have no doubt that a time will come when we will have to recognize that if you want to save lives in this country, you can't be risking them. And that if you want to be able to work comfortably going forward, that we need to make sure that as many people protect themselves as possible as we do this. I say so conscious that there may be some who may feel that why now? And I ask the question, why not? Now, why? Because, Mr. Speaker, since December 1998, and before that, the 1970s with the Cox Commission, this has been a journey that has been long. It is not finished by the passage of this legislation at all today. We continue, as you know, with the consultations next year. What we will do this year, and what consultations have already started, is with the Charter of Barbados. And we've asked for a charter simply because we feel that there should be a document separate from the Constitution that sets out who we are and sets out what we are prepared to pledge to each other and how we are prepared to work with each other. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about the legal, it's also about how we express ourselves and what we want to say to each other and say about our journey and about where we want to go. And that's all that the Charter is. And I believe that the transition committee that has been established, the Republic Transition Advisory Committee, that they have started that process of consultation on the Charter. We believe that the Charter should be completed and available for Her Excellency to be able to read on the Independence Day as the embodiment of our country and as the embodiment of what we want for our country as she reads it. And that if we can have that after the consultation that takes place in this month, that we will point to the world and to ourselves and to Barbadians yet unborn where we stand and what we see going forward and what we would like to work towards as a nation going forward and as a people. These may sound, for some people, airy-fairy, but they are critical because what we speak, we achieve. I always remember Kamau Brathwaite and his work and the emphasis that he placed on a name. And there is so much in a name, especially for those of us who were brought across the waters and had our names stripped from us and forced then to take a name and an image of someone that we didn't know and didn't reflect who we are. And therefore, there are certain things that matter because they tell you how you face each day and whether you face it with the confidence that you can achieve, but with the humility that you are no greater nor no less than any other person. These things matter and must matter not just for this generation and those who went before, but it is our duty to take the baton and to run our leg and to perfect our leg as best we can while conscious that we must equally hand it to another generation to continue the race. Mr. Speaker, I use this analogy all the time. And why? Because very often people want to feel that you can achieve everything in your lifetime. We can't. But we must run our leg faithfully, with passion, with commitment, with discipline, and with an understanding that we must move the needle of progress forward. For if we don't move the needle of progress forward, we will find ourselves regressing in a way that is not the intention of those who came together to found modern Barbados. We will have difficult conversations as a nation. That is the nature of a nation, just as it is the nature of a family. We don't get always to choose the circumstances within which we function, nor does a family. But whatever circumstances or whatever environment within which we function, if our values are solid And if our commitment to those values and principles remains solid, then we will always find a way. You know, even this morning, we reflected on how we address challenges. And there's only one way to address challenges: sincerely and frontally. And if we put them one side, it will be no different from that person who ignores a festering wound as a diabetic. And we all know what happens if they do so. We have reached a point in our maturity as a democracy and as a nation state where this is the next natural step. We are not taking anyone for granted in doing it, but we're embodying and giving thanks for the work of many who have gone to the great beyond, and a few who are still here, like Sir Henry Ford and Melanie Newton and Professor Norma Ford. It is unfortunate that Sir Morris passed last week, and I paid tribute to him separately, and being told that he's being buried on Friday. But he too represents that kind of Barbadian who understood that there are certain things just above partisan consideration. And that is where I spoke in the terms in which I spoke, and reflected my complete admiration for his work, his dignity, and the fact that throughout his entire life he remained a gentleman. Similarly, Sir Henry Ford in the same way. And it is ironic that both of them served the parish of Christchurch, but on different sides. That tells the story of Barbados. That tells the story of Barbados. And that we can come together when it matters. Mr. Speaker, I am humbled by the opportunity to lead this country at this point in time. To be able to say to the world that we are moving to the next stage of our development. And that we have the full confidence that those who are of us and from us have the capacity to carry themselves and to comport themselves with a dignity and with a commitment to fundamental values that are intended not only to uplift us as Barbadians, but to uplift humanity. That is the commitment of this government and of the people of Barbados at this juncture of our journey. We are not seeking to rewrite history. Indeed, we are seeking to add to history. We are not seeking to move away from those whose courage brought us safely thus far, and history may well record that their courage is the one that shall always be exemplified, because to carry a country from a colony to one where people can vote for their own destiny, as Sir Grantley did, and to carry a colony to a point of independence where we would have to be responsible for our own revenue, for our own, well, we were always responsible given the form of government we had with the UK from settlement, but responsible for other aspects of our development without the development compact that would compensate us for the centuries of extraction of wealth that was taken from this nation, that they exemplified the courage to make that journey. Ours is simply now to follow in the shadow of that courage and to ensure we pass the baton to the next generation. Mr. Speaker, I therefore, with great pride and dignity, ask that this constitutional amendment bill that seeks to bring to an end the reality of a British head of state, a British monarch being the head of state of Barbados since 1625, a period of time that marks 396 years, that we bring this chapter to an end by the actions of an independent Barbadian people, confident and standing tall on the basis of the achievements of those who went before to allow us to be here. We do not take for granted their journey, and we shall not in any way dilute their memory or place at risk the integrity of their actions in bringing us safely thus far. But it is now time for us to move to the next stage. Mr. Speaker, let this constitutional amendment bill be read a second time on today's date, conscious and confident that the people of Barbados have reached this journey after many, many, many years, but deliberately now want to say to the rest of the world, we are going to the next stage of our development. Let it be read a second time. I'm obliged to you, sir.
Second. Question that the bill be read a second time. Honorable, you need to turn on your mics, please. You need to turn on the microphone. Honorable Leader of Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the Honorable Prime Minister did indicate to me that she would not be long and take only about 45 minutes. And I expressed this belief then. I'm proven right. I think she did, in fact, address the bill before us in 45 minutes, but then went beyond in addressing a few other matters, as is her wont and right. Now, I had indicated to the Honorable Leader of Government Business that if she had someone who was prepared to speak before lunch, they could go now, because I can't give you the assurance or undertaking, Mr. Speaker, that I'll be through in 45 minutes. I may very well go well into the lunchtime. I am advised that that is quite all right. So here we go. The English term republic comes out of some Latin origin that refer to, in the two words, or two parts of the word, the affairs or concerns and things of the people. It's characterized by a philosophy and ideology that power is vested in the hands and voices and in the will of the people, and is a philosophical position which is opposed to any notions of monarchy or tyranny. We seek by this measure to delink from the British monarchy. But I want to examine that philosophy just for a moment. The whole idea of power being vested in the hands and in the voices and the will of the people. We have to ask ourselves the question as to the extent to which in Barbados this is the reality, the extent to which as we go forward under a new constitutional regime, we want to make it further so the experienced reality. There are several who would suggest that in Barbados today, under the current political system, institutional life, constitutional dynamics as they are actualized and played out, the power is only vested in the people in notional terms. In notional terms. I support that view, and I'm strongly of the view that governments of this day in Barbados must see it as a significant part of their mandate to so address issues of governance that we make that reality and that experience more than simply something notional. The idea of power being vested in the hands and in the voices and the will of the people. There is a great extent to which many across Barbados do not believe that power lies with the people. And I don't see any visible or physical movement, but I'm sure the honorable member of St. Michael East is nodding in the affirmative when I say that. And so I repeat it. that perhaps it may engage the attention, interest, and ultimately, hopefully, the support of others in here. In notional terms, this is quite true. To some extent, in actuality, we go through certain forms of public expression in relation to our constitutional life as a country, our political life as a country, that gives the opportunity to people, to express themselves, principally so, a vote, the right to vote when it comes. But by and large, I do not know that there's a sense among the majority in Barbados that power lies in the hands and the voices and the will of the people, certainly not the majority of the people in Barbados. So we have to ask ourselves, as we contemplate becoming a republic, the extent to which we want to lead in the effort to make it more so the reality that that notion applies here in Barbados. We delink, or can delink fairly smoothly, I imagine, from the monarchy, as is the intention in due course. But Mr. Speaker, the issue of tyranny cannot be easily bypassed or glossed over. It is but a small step to tyranny from absolute power. And that reality has reflected itself all over this world in many repeated instances, some even here in the Caribbean. It is but a small step from absolute power to tyranny. The notion of the republic dismisses the idea not only of monarchy, but of tyranny. Now, I would have to say, if I am to be honest, there is the tyranny of the system. We talk about tyranny, we relate it to personalities, to leaders. Some people accuse presidents and prime ministers of becoming tyrants. I'm going broader than that. I am not focusing on that, and I hope I'm clearly understood. But there's the tyranny of the system under which people are forced to live. And the question has to be faced and honestly answered: is that the situation, the reality in Barbados? Is there systemic tyranny? When the system locks the majority in a confined space of persistent disadvantage, is the system working tyranny when it locks persistently so, perpetually so, the majority in a confined space of disadvantage and disenfranchisement? Does the system work the evil of tyranny when it robs certain classes of the power of hope? You are a sociologist by training as well. You have so many things, Mr. Speaker. It seems as though all applies to you. But you would honestly face and answer this question, I'm sure, by careful examination. Is the system working the evil of tyranny when it robs certain classes of the power of hope? There is a saying, it comes from Thomas Jefferson, that government is the strongest of which every man feels himself a part. When people feel excluded, when people feel marginalized, when people feel dispossessed, when people feel disempowered, when people feel left out, when people feel as though they're second or third class citizens in their own country, they do not feel a part of that governance experience. They do not feel a part of that which we profess that we live as a reality, when in fact benefits accrue only to select groups, and when the wider context of the majority is other than that, the best which is experienced by others in the country. Kwame Nkrumah said, "We face neither east nor west. We face forward. We face neither east nor west. We face forward." Now that is a statement that is designed to evoke hope and confidence in the blessings of tomorrow. That is a statement that is supposed to reflect a sense of independence and confidence in one's own identity and ability to face the world, to look forward with hope for the better day that tomorrow promises. We face neither east nor west. We face forward. As we come to the point in our life in this country where we contemplate becoming a republic, this should be this very thought shared by Nkrumah, should be the foremost driving thought. But I think, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, if we're honest, we have to admit that despite our best efforts to date, the circumstances of the now moment, economically, socially, do not evoke the desired level of hope nor confidence. Barbados has been brought by dint of various circumstances to a place where hope has been diminished in the hearts, in the minds, in the spirits of too many. As we take the step to become a republic, we have to renew our resolve and recommit to ensuring the rebirth of hope in the bosoms of our people. If we can't do that, then all we do is change the constitutional arrangements under which we live without changing for the better the reality that our people experience in the majority case. And that is my understanding of what we ought to be doing. That is my understanding of what we're attempting to do. If we conceive of anything less than that, if that which we conceptualize does not bring us to the point where whatever constitutional arrangements we put in place must be the framework within which hope can be reborn in the bosoms of our people, then we miss the mark. We lose the moment, and opportunity goes by. Now, I want to make it abundantly clear. Some of us are given to easy misunderstanding. And I make it abundantly clear. I support the move to Barbados becoming a republic, Barbados becoming a parliamentary republic, doing away with our monarchical system that has governed our arrangements constitutionally, becoming a non-monarchical republic, becoming a non-presidential republic. I remember, and I know that the Honorable Prime Minister would have forgotten. I remember not so long ago from this very position being aware of government's projection to the people of this country that that step would be taken in an effort to complete our journey of independence. I remember querying when and where we would be about that business specifically. And that was not too long ago. The Honorable Prime Minister said, perhaps prudently then, that that was not the now moment. The economic circumstances in Barbados were such, the costs to making this constitution, this change in our constitutional arrangements and all that would attend upon it, that cost was such that that was not the moment for us facing down the economic straits and the battle with debt and the battle with earnings, the battle with lack of growth and all of that. I was taken a little bit by surprise when, therefore, in the throne speech, we were just a few months after that exchange told that we would be going republic certainly by the time the next independence anniversary came around this year of 2021. I was never able to ascertain what brought about the change of mind or change of thinking, or whether in fact it was my early misunderstanding that led me to an erroneous conclusion as to what position. All right. Well, I am hearing that the answer has not yet been given to me. It will come later. And I would be very much appreciative of that. And I am saying that to reinforce the view, not to attack the government in any way. Sometimes I'm misunderstood. I'm saying that to reinforce the view that I support, and very strongly so, the move to becoming Barbados becoming a republic. I support the move to our constitution speaking to the appointment of a head of state was a non-executive head of state as recommended in the Ford Commission of 1998. I believe that cabinet government has served this country well since, 1954, early 50s. Cabinet government has served this country well with the executive head of government, so to speak, being rooted in the office of the Prime Minister and head of cabinet. And so I don't know that we need to go to a position where we have an executive head of state and then we find ourselves faced with all of the confused realities that others have had to face, with blurred lines of responsibility and dual seeming roles, and conflict of personalities. I don't know that we need to go there. And I believe that we can reserve the executive branch of government, such as has served us well since the 50s. So I'm making it clear, I support, as the Ford Commission recommended, a non-executive head as president of the Republic of Barbados. I support, and I said this very early in the piece, the Honorable Prime Minister has referred to it today, and she did alert me before she did that she would do this. I have no problems with that. But very early in the piece, when the Honorable Prime Minister indicated when the time was appropriate to use her words, she would be wanting to lead her government in nominating Her Excellency, currently serving as Governor General, to be the first President of the Republic. And immediately I publicly said I'm supportive of that, again, because that is very much part of the recommendations of the Ford Constitutional Reform Committee of 1998, stipulated or recommended that the incumbent Governor General at the time when the transition was made should be the first President of the Republic. I support that. We can go into all of the credits that we could identify that may be associated with the professional career, the personal bearing, the contribution of the current office of Governor General, Her Excellency. And there'll be a time, I presume, to do that in fuller detail. But I support that coming out of the Ford Commission as well, and will join in that nomination of Her Excellency at the appropriate time when the moment comes. I support the process by which the election, the nomination will take place, and subsequently an election will be held and a vote taken. I support the notion of a two-thirds majority of both houses, where a vote has to be taken, voting independently, two-thirds of this honorable chamber and of the other place. I do not believe, as some would advocate, that a simple majority in situations such as this would suffice, especially in this first instance of Barbados becoming a republic and naming a first president. A simple majority can, in my view, in our system of government, lend itself too easily to politics being the dominant dynamic, which will influence the result and outturn of such events. If you take, for instance, the configuration of the last Parliament here, House of Assembly, Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, what, 16 to 14? And were we to have gone Republic then, and the government of the day were to have nominated person A, then by simple majority force of numbers and not large numbers, that vote could easily have carried, especially when one takes into consideration the dynamic of prime ministerial dominance over cabinet and over Parliament to some extent. So I support two-thirds vote when the vote, if it becomes necessary, of both houses of the Honorable Parliament voting separately, both for election and, in the case, should it ever come to that, of removal from office. I also support, as I anticipate, will be made known to the House in the case of a vote being expressed, that would be by secret ballot. I think these things are important in the absence of a referendum, for which many people have called. We operate under a representative democracy. There are those who have called for a referendum. I can live without a referendum on the issue. Once there's a proper program of education and information, there are many who have grown up in this country ever since the heady days of this debate, who have not perhaps been the beneficiaries of much of the argument on either side, and perhaps they need to be better informed as to what this is all about. They may be helped to disabuse their minds of some of the myths and misgivings that may have fallen upon their ears. In the absence of a referendum, a people's vote, in the face of the fact that we have a properly functioning representative democracy, and that the people of Barbados, through their representatives in this House, who when time comes to vote, one imagines vote in their interests respectively, that this is where we can achieve what we want to achieve without in any way fearing that we may be going against the will of the people. We need that strong education program. I have to say, and I've said this to the Honorable Prime Minister, and I've said it publicly, I support the move to republic. I support the nomination when it comes in the appropriate format and time. But I believe very strongly that we are doing this at the wrong time, and that the process leaves much to be desired. I believe that there are many out there who are of the view that we're not getting this right when it comes to the process. The old Bajan expression of putting the cart before the horse. In my view, with respect to this, the cart is not even in the same yard as a horse. And I think that that should give us pause for thought. I'm sure I'm not alone in that view. I've heard many voices, some quiet, some loud, which have spoken in that vein. We've got the cart before the horse. We need to do the business of, in my humble submission, constitutional reform before we make the formal move, establishing a republic, because that is what we are doing if we change the arrangements for the office of head of state. We are, by dint of that action, establishing a republic. We are establishing a republic without a constitution for that republic. And that horse is in a different yard altogether from the cart. We need, beyond reform, thinking in terms of the actual republic constitution, we need some significant other constitutional reforms, parliamentary reforms. I've said before, I believe it very strongly, we need a fixed date for elections in Barbados. We're practicing democracy. We are practicing democracy. The ultimate expression of that democratic privilege in practice is the right to vote. And no single person, no matter how popular he, or in this case she might be, no single person should be put in a position where he or she can determine the context and circumstances in which I get the opportunity to exercise that right. That should be framed in constitutional stipulation. No prime minister should be able to say, I'm calling an election now, 2 years before the due constitutional date. No prime minister should be able to say, I'm holding on for these few extra months, simply because there's some allowance for that, and you go beyond the 5-year period. No one person, man or woman, woman or man, should be able to so affect my right to vote. It is the Constitution of Barbados that should determine when I get to vote by fixed date, as happens in some places. But when prime ministers, depending on the circumstances, guided by their whims or fancies, or political pressures, or fears, decide, let's do it now. We're doing that in the interest of party. We're doing that in the interest of our own political fortunes. We're doing that without reference to the fact, look, this is a democracy. People have an ultimate right to vote, and nothing that I do should interfere with that right to vote. That is where I stand on that. We have got a Senate which has the power to put a check on this lower house and the actions we take here. But a lot of what people see with reference to the role and work of the Senate suggests to them that it is just a rubber stamp. I think experiences of recent times with this particular parliament have suggested it's not just a rubber stamp. Senate, in fact, can be very active and formally and robustly perform a role in part that it is in part expected to play. But we need to broaden the responsibility, that set of functions attributed to them, and give more meaning to that which they do. I believe there should be an element of the Senate of Barbados that should be elected. I don't want to get too much into this today, there'll be time for that. All I'm simply saying, Mr. Speaker, when we go to a we go to a republic constitution, there's significant reforms in which we must engage. And I don't like the idea that we're becoming a republic and then we are going to discuss constitutional reform. And I hope it can be appreciated, the position I'm taking. I support going to a republic. I support jointly denomination when the appropriate time comes. I support the process when the time comes, as far as I'm advised of that process. But I don't like the moment in which we are choosing to do this for several reasons. Now, I have to ask hard questions. And recently I was confronted a bit because I simply asked some questions. I'm not the first to be asking questions in this country. I just asked about 8 or 9 recently, and there was some pushback from the other side. I know when the Honorable Prime Minister was leaving office, she asked about 18 repeatedly. And I supported her right to ask those 18 questions. So I don't think that there should be much of a pushback if you ask 9 questions, which are pertinent, and no comparison. No comparison. What if you believe that there's no comparison in the questions? Well, fine. But there's my right to ask those questions. And that right should not be challenged. Challenge the merits of the questions if you want, but not the right to ask the questions. And if I were mischievous, I would really get into some of the specifics of those questions and let members decide for themselves. But that is not me by nature, and that is not for the now woman. But the question has to be asked. So what is the agenda driving the government, driving the Prime Minister, that we must make this move now, at this time? Why can't this be perhaps next year, November, July 26, some date next year? Why now? What is the agenda upon which the government is embarked that makes it absolutely necessary that we do this now, a couple of months from now, a few weeks from now? If I think politically, I come quickly to the conclusion that it might have something to do with election timing, possibly. I might be wrong, but if I think politically, that's where I come down in the absence of any other information. If I think politically, I conclude it may have something to do with an election platform issue. I might be wrong. If I think politically, that is where I come down. I do not like the November 30th date, our Independence Day. I think even if not intended, as the Prime Minister was clear to point out, this over time will diminish the legacy around the contribution of the Right Excellent Errol Barrow, father of independence. It may not for those present in this Parliament today, because that history is fresh with us. We are products of that independence movement. But 40 years from now, 25 years from now, when the generation or generations that succeed us come by, despite the best intentions of this Parliament and this government, I have a feeling that what will have resulted would have been an erosion, a diminution of the legacy, appreciation, the value for his contribution. And if I'm seeking not to be political in the decisions I take or support with reference to this move to becoming a republic, then I can't see how I cannot say that and put that as a consideration. That even if it is not intended, because it may very well not be intended, and there are those who are saying that that is the ultimate intention. But that's not the point I make. Even if it is not intended, what over time will result is that Republic Day of November 30th will be associated with the Parliament of this day, and all the thoughts that went around the move at this time, and you will see the erosion of the Barrow contribution. I believe, frankly, quite apart from November 30th, whatever year it is, the better date is July 26. we call it a day of significance. And the Honorable Prime Minister alluded to it. It is to me, among blacks, majority class in Barbados, the birth of consciousness. It is the birth of an identity which was evolving and which has set us on a path to this now moment. And that the move to republic, when we get there, in fact, culminates for me what began in the 1930s and on July 26, 1937. This move to republic is another bout in the struggle that evolved then. And it was a people's struggle. We can take this step as a constitutional initiative. We can conceive of this as just a parliamentary action, a statute, a law, a bill passed here. But we're talking, if you reflect on the 1930s and specifically the struggles of the 1930s, you're talking about an evolutionary process in which the impulse of the people was to create a framework for governance within which the interests of the people became paramount. And if we are not there in our thinking, then again, we have missed the mark. This is not simply constitutional. This is about a people's impulse, getting ultimate expression and taking the ultimate step to govern their own affairs and to chart their own destiny. If we do it the way we are doing it, the cart is not in the same yard as the horse. What we are doing is setting up a republic by means of installment. So come November 30th will be installment 1. And sometime thereafter will be installment 2 and 3. We are setting up a republic state, in my humble submission, by installments. When the Honorable Prime Minister says that we are independent and we don't have to go to ask leave of anybody's parliament, I don't believe that that is the expression of a lawyer, which is her profession. I believe that that is the expression of a political leader. But the truth of the matter is there's some realities with which we must reckon if we are to do this properly. We removed Nelson out of the top of Broad Street. I think he's housed somewhere in the area of the Garrison. I'm not sure, out of sight and hopefully out of mind. And I believe that when we take actions like this, and the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister said it, there's some things that should be beyond the realm of politics. Some things in politics should not be politicized. Some things in politics should not be politicized. We moved Nelson. He's gone. Whereabouts known to some. He's gone. We have to replace him, I imagine, at some stage with something else. And I hope that we don't use that action and opportunity as another instance to be political, to politicize what we do. I frankly do believe that what we erect there in his place should not be some personal representational image of somebody, of anybody. This is only my view. I do not know if there would be 6 people who would agree with it. But it's my view, which I hold. I shared it with the relevant ministry when they advertised for Submissions, I have not heard a single word from them. Honorable member for St. Philip West. I can't recall whether you were still in charge of that portfolio or member St. George South. But I submitted I submitted my view with respect to this. I believe that what should be erected, member for St. Michael East, in the spot where Nelson prominently stood, should be not a personal representational structure, but an aspirational symbol. An aspirational symbol that excites every young person in Barbados to dream and to believe that he or she can achieve personally and contribute to nation building. I think that that is something to which the Prime Minister referred. We want to see this emanating from the lives and the efforts, the ambitions of our young people. And I believe the symbol should be abstract. I believe it should be aspirational and should be so architecturally done that it speaks loudly to the young people of Barbados that this is what Barbados upholds as the ultimate and the ideal that you as a person, a young person in this country can aspire to, dream of, believe, acclaim, achieve, and become. I believe it should be that. Or, alternatively, it should be a celebratory symbol of the achievements of women in this country. I have long said women, we laud a lot of political leaders, a lot of businessmen for leading in the development of Barbados. My humble view, it has been the women of Barbados, especially many who worked in households to raise families and to raise our leaders and to give the products of their womb to this country. And these products led this country to the level of development which we now experience. And those women in every sector of life, whether it's agriculture or health, those women should be celebrated. They're coming to the fore now. We have glowing examples in this honorable house, led by the Prime Minister, my honorable former friend from St. Michael Southeast. And I look forward to the making up. You're taking me back. And other honorable persons, ladies, females in this house, and outside of this house, and the one we contemplate to become the first president. And women, therefore, have done this country proud. And men have long occupied prominently so, more prominently so, the seats of power. That is changing now. But the contribution of women is to be celebrated and heralded. And an abstract symbol that salutes and celebrates that contribution at the top of Broad Street would work fine. If it is a personal representational symbol, a structure, then one party will accuse the other of promoting its own. And then that takes us into the world of the politicized. We need to move beyond that and carry the country forward. And that is something that we need to. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm no lawyer, but I've had some concerns. When I first heard the Prime Minister speaking to the nation and suggested how we were going to go about this as a lay person, not a legally trained person or a luminary of excellence such as yourself, of high achievement and acclaim, and wealth thereof derived. When I heard,
obviously, you're not speaking about me in the last question.
When I heard it as a lay person, it caused me to pause because can the Barbados Parliament revoke an order in council of the UK Parliament. I see you're smiling, Mr. Speaker, and maybe your mind has been given to the same considerations. I am not confusing anybody's. I am not confusing. I am simply saying, and if we want to get brutish about this, we can get brutish about this. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister said that the government has been advised by prominent persons whom we have saluted and honored. Sir David Simmons, you don't mind my calling, Sir Dennis Byron, Justice Sherman Moore, and I have no doubt others. And I have no doubt that the government of Barbados would come to proposing this to the House on the basis of good legal advice. All I am saying here, if I be allowed, Mr. Speaker, in your House, is that there are equally prominent persons, legally experienced, trained, and acclaimed, who are of a view that this is inappropriate. I am a lay person, Mr. Speaker, so I simply have to raise the questions. When I heard it mentioned, it occurred to me, is that possible? I've spoken to a number of legal people who hold very strongly the view that it is inappropriate. It is inappropriate for the Barbados Parliament to seek to undertake an action that results in what we perceive to be the revocation of an order in council of the UK Parliament. So don't try to crucify me. Answer the issues raised by others out there who are equally legally trained and otherwise disposed from where you are. That is what democracy is about. That's what debate is about. Mr. Speaker, as I said, we want to get brutish about this, we can get brutish about this here. Because this government doesn't like to be challenged by anybody on anything. All knowledge is not reposed over there. There are people in this country, like the Honourable Member Sir Michael East and the Honourable Member Sir Michael West, who want to be properly informed on matters such as this. And who don't feel that we must settle for an opinion which you hail and bring. And the question, therefore, Mr. Speaker, can the Barbados Parliament revoke an order in council of the UK Parliament? That question is being raised by many, and it has to be properly answered. And we have a learned Attorney General in this place, and he will get the opportunity to speak from his feet. He has spoken in the past from his feet and has proven to be wrong. You will recall, Mr. Speaker, even an instance in this House when I, from this place, suggested that the course of action upon which this House was embarked was wrong. And he asked for a leave of a few minutes to put me right, to educate me. I'm no lawyer. He came back, and this House had to admit that I was right and he, Honorable Attorney General, was wrong. If we want to get brutish about this, we can get brutish. I ain't come here to behave like that. But if that's the type of debate we want to engage in, let's go. All premise, I am absolutely focused. Another question, Mr. Speaker. If it is that the Barbados Parliament can lawfully repeal or revoke an order in council in the British Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and the Barbados Parliament repeals that order in council in the UK Parliament and the Constitution of Barbados was a schedule to that order, then the question has to be addressed to settle any doubts in the minds of people. On what basis then does the Constitution stand? Mr. Speaker, you're a lawyer. The Constitution is an attachment, a schedule, an appendix to an order in council. If you repeal or revoke the order, on what basis does the Constitution stand alone? I'm here to be educated by those who know better. I'm simply raising concerns that others have as we seek to make this very important step. Now, I do some of my own research, and I try to find information which can help me to come to a sound opinion. I'm not going to be misled and influenced by any advice coming from any dubious sources. Mr. Speaker, I came across this article. It is the Jersey and Guernsey Law Review of October 2012. The Jersey and Guernsey Law Review of October 2012 to be made a document of the House. It talks with reference to repealing, lapsing of orders in council and stuff like that. May quote clause 11, paragraph 11. When the enabling power in primary legislation is repealed, any legislation made under that power lapses. Mr. Speaker, when the enabling power in primary legislation is repealed, any legislation made under that power lapses. Now, I try to understand what we're seeking to do here in this context. Because if you repeal, if you think you have the power to repeal the order in council, British Parliament, that gave us independence and attached our constitution as a schedule to that order, you repeal that order, how does the constitution stand on its own? To me, that's an act of dismemberment. Now, this says to me, treating to the same issue as far as I can see as a layperson, when the enabling power in primary legislation is repealed, any legislation made under that power lapses. This is because delegated legislation only has force of law because primary legislation says that this is the case. And once that legislation is repealed, there's nothing to give the designated legislation any force of law. Now, please educate me, because to me as a layman, they tell me we're doing something wrong. I understand from that it is the mechanism of the order in council that brings the appended act into force. So if you do away with the order in council, it seems to me you've done away with the act that is appended as a schedule to that. The validity of the dependent piece of legislation attached to the order in council. You see, it is the order in council that is the parent piece of the legislation. Of course, Mr. Speaker, there will be those who would say that the Constitution is of such a peculiar nature or particular nature. Constitution is the supreme law. There are notions of that. Supremacy over all law of the Constitution. And therefore an argument can be made from that side. All I'm saying here, we are making a serious step in this country. And there's a body of legal opinion who believes that we are getting it wrong. And we can't just sit and have government say without question that we're getting it right. Prove that we're getting it right and disabuse our minds of any fallacy, any error that might exist therein. Does the peculiar nature of the Constitution make it an exempted piece of legislation within reference to that notion that the schedule or appended piece of legislation depends upon the parent piece of legislation for its validity and existence. So you do away with the parent, you've done away with the dependent piece of legislation. If we are wrong, and I pray we're not, I bring an honest position to this thing, Mr. Speaker. I plan to support this thing. I bring an honest position to this thing. I plan to support this thing, trusting that the government has it right. But I have a right, a responsibility, and a duty to raise in here, contrary to what other people might think, other views that challenge that which is being put before us. That's what debate is all about. Now, the 28 others on that side can all speak with one voice, whatever, notwithstanding what. But I have to raise a voice of question, a challenge. And if they're pleased, the rest of them, to sit down in the face of alternative views and not give some consideration to those views, then we're in a sorry state. It doesn't mean that you are anti-government. It doesn't mean that you're anti-republic. It doesn't mean that you're anti the legislation. It doesn't mean that you're anti the proposed nominee. Nothing like that. All it means is there are other views being purported on this issue, and therefore we need to have a clear understanding of what we are doing. We expose, if we get it wrong, we expose ourselves to legal challenges brought pursuant to or consequent upon any action that we take as a people under a constitution, if it is proven that we got it wrong. Mr. Speaker, Guyana had to move to a republic after independence. As far as I could see, it was provided in their independence constitution for them to make that move. It was provided in their independence constitution, independence order of 1966 for them to make that move. I can't talk pretty, Mr. Speaker, but I can read well. I read this document, and if it's not a document, it's the statutory instrument 1966, number 575, the Guyana Independence Order of 1966, made on the 16th day of May 1966, and laid before Parliament, coming into operation 16th May, 26th May 1960, at the court of Buckingham Palace. And it speaks to the fact, it's here, I highlighted here, I read all of this. It speaks to the fact that enshrined in the independence order for Guyana was a provision in the independence constitution that would enable them smoothly to move to a republic. And there are those who believe that this is the way it should be done. And I only do not read this, Mr. Speaker, to keep these people here all day. I can read this, Mr. Speaker. I'll read it at clause 3. Subject to the provisions of the next following section and to the other provisions of this order, the Constitution of Guyana settled in Schedule number 2 to this order. The Constitution as Schedule number 2 to this order shall come into effect on the appointed day. Subject to the provisions of this order, section clause 5, all laws made or having effect as if made under the existing orders, enforced in otherwise having effect as part of the law of British Guyana immediately before the appointed day in this section refers to existing laws, shall continue to have effect as part of the law of Guyana on or after that day, but all such laws shall, as from that day, be construed with such modifications, adaptations, qualifications, and exceptions as may be necessary to bring them into conformity with the Ghana Independence Act 19. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to read all of that, but all it is saying is, yeah, well, I got lost along the way, but I could tell you that all it's saying, I could tell you that all it is saying here is, you see, I am not a learned Attorney General responsible for advising this government. Ultimately, I am not he. I don't hold that position, so I can get lost along the way. But there are other learned people out there in the discipline of law who are just as lost as I am, and they need to be helped, and that's why I raise these issues. And if learned people in Barbados are lost, Mr. Speaker, you know what's happening with the lay people out there who are in majority numbers and who vote and whose support we want in this move towards the republic. They need to be educated too, Mr. Speaker. Lost along the way. Ghana provided for a move to republic by having it put into the independence constitution. That is seen by many to be the proper way to do it, Mr. Speaker. Trinidad Order in Council was revoked by the UK Parliament, as I understand it, in its independence constitution. But we're doing it the other way. We're establishing a republic, and then we will develop the constitution. Because we have revoked or repealed the order in council, the parent piece of legislation, to that schedule, the constitution, leaving it on its own, in the opinion of many, erroneously so. Others did it in the right and proper way. So the question has to be faced down. Are we establishing a republic state without a constitution? There have been instances when matters of high concern and when matters of high controversy, such as these, have had to be made settled by recourse to the opinion of the courts. And perhaps if the divide in Barbados on this matter is wide enough, if there are sufficient number of people of eminence in the field of law who believe that we're doing this the wrong way, legally and constitutionally, maybe there should be a declaration made by the court on it and settle it once and for all. And settle it once and for all. You want to take the people along on a journey with you as a government. In fact, this is the people's journey. You're just the appointed leaders of the day. And it would do us well to remember that, of the moment. We are the appointed leaders of the time. But it's the people's journey. This journey began before us. And will be ongoing long after we are gone. You want to take the people along with you. Not only legally and otherwise. It's a bad moment for us to be doing this. I've said this. I'm going to support this because this Parliament has brought it here. I would like to think in good faith, on good advice. I'll support this, but I have these concerns which other people have. And if you open your ears a little, you will hear. But beyond the constitutional legal arguments, and some of the other arguments that I've raised, it's a bad moment with COVID. This is not the right moment, in my view, to be doing it. Some would say, and I've heard this said, we do not know what next year will bring. We may still be faced down with COVID. And yes, we might. I would prefer to believe that by the middle of next year, this thing will have gone. I live in hope. That hope, and pray that I'm right. But I don't know that it is sufficient to stand here today and say we do not know what the situation health-wise in the country will be like next year. And therefore we can't wait until next year. Right now, Mr. Speaker, to my humble submission, people are not turned on to this thing. People are not turned on. The government may be. The parliament obviously is today. But I don't know if people is turned on to this thing. There's a lot of raging debate as to what it means and why do it now and let's do it now. We should have done it yesterday and all of that. But you know the economic hardship that obtains out there, people's minds are focused on that. People's spirits, Mr. Speaker, are depressed with their own economic hardship concerns, family stress at record levels, Mr. Speaker. You know these things when you live close to the people as you do, whether politically in St. Michael Central, or as a practicing lawyer, or in the pastoral field. You know the stresses that people are going through. You know what people, we know where people are at in Barbados today. Family, stress, high levels. Business uncertainty such that businessmen are making demands of the government and of the people which are not in sync with law because there's business uncertainty. There's an enforced sense of distance because I have to keep 6 feet away from you, Mr. Speaker, and because we can't celebrate together anymore, and because we can't share a moment of bereavement together because the numbers are limited. So he who you have known from your boyhood days is buried and you are not able to attend. There's a sense of enforced distance. This is a bad moment to be doing this. The mental stress levels, we're seeing and hearing people talk about it. People who are involved with people in this way. There's a highly reinforced sense of dependency among people. You face it, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure. My experiences in Michael West must be the same as yours. Many telephone calls every day, all hours of the day, because people feel a heightened sense of dependency. They do not know where the next meal is coming from. And that's a reality. This is where people are. This is where people's minds and spirits are at. Now we see increased infection rates and incidents of death in Barbados. This is where people are. This is where people are today. And Krum, I remind you, said, we don't look east, we don't look west, we look forward. But people find it not so easy to look forward today. They're looking over their shoulders to see who's coming too close to them for fear of contracting the COVID. They're looking at other people getting ahead because they can benefit out of their circumstance, whereas they're left behind in further straits of misery beyond the norm for them. This is where people are in their minds. This is not the right moment to do this. I can't be prophetic and say next year will be better. But what I do know is that this moment now is not the right moment for this. We have lamented, Mr. Speaker, the wrongs that parliaments have done in this space. I think the Honorable Prime Minister, when she spoke, he referred to one or two. Even in recent debates in this House, we have lamented the actions of past parliaments that allowed for the right of franchise on the basis of property and wealth. The right to vote was related to your wealth status, your property status. Most recently, we lamented the fact the Minister of Energy and Small Business did, that parliaments in the past criminalized the legitimate activity of vending The Honourable Member for St. Michael East, in a recent debate on Glengarry prisons, lamented the actions of past Parliament in confining men to undignified and inhumane conditions and situations of forced labor in prisons in Barbados. All the actions of this Parliament. Mr. Speaker, we cannot afford to get this one wrong as the Parliament of the day. I can't deal with that. Now, what I'm done.
Continue, Honourable Member.
Yes, thank you. Now, we've had, and this should be a high point for us, becoming a republic. It should not be shrouded in controversy. It should not be politicized, as the Honourable Prime Minister said. I'm not seeking to do that. I'm raising questions which are being raised out there, and questions which I have myself. And I'm open to further enlightenment. But we have embarked for some time on a philosophical journey, a number of high points reached and achieved, and republic, becoming a republic should be another one. Birth of labor organizations and political parties in this country in 30s and 40s, being celebrated today in Barbados still. I already spoke of the political consciousness of the 1930s, the attainment of suffrage, adult suffrage, and female suffrage, without reference to property status or wealth status. The whole decolonization process that has brought us to this point, that gave us this Parliament, and to the point now where which we look beyond the now monarchical constitutional type arrangements to becoming the birth of a black majority political class in this country. Ultimately, independence on November 30th in 1966. And all of this celebrated and achieved along the journey, along the way, in a context of educational advancement, health services development, infrastructural modernization, governance maturity, regional leadership, and global respectability. All of these things have been part and parcel of that journey and part of that course. And we have come to this high point, which ought to go down in the annals of history as another high point. And therefore, and I've said this to the Prime Minister, I don't think that this is the now moment. In this now moment, we should be doing this, because this should mark for us a time of high celebration and a time of serious reflection. You know the things we have to celebrate, and of which I'm proud as a Barbadian? Stability of governance, even in the region among our neighbors. We have seen the absence of that in some instances, the marked and sad absence of that. We've set stability of governance over these years, and we want to take that to the next level. The developmental status that we have achieved in the world, even despite our recent shortcomings. Our reputation globally and regionally, even among developed nation spaces. Our people's advancement in the arts and culture, in sports, in academic, in the professions, Mr. Speaker, health. Every time I see Dr. Ford and the comment is made that he is alone in his field in Barbados, a product of this country, who is now able in our moment of darkest peril to lead the charge and to be in advance of our fight to save this nation in basic ways, a product of our system. I see this. These are things to be celebrated. The step to republic should be a high point for celebration. Now is not the time to do it in the current circumstances. But as we do it, I've said this before, and if a government with this mandate does not understand that it's one of its principal responsibilities is to mainstream the peripheral elements of our economy, then it's missing the mark. There are a lot of people, sectors in this country, classes in this country, sectors in this country, emerging groups in this country, economically, that should be mainstream. To me, government today in Barbados should be about mainstreaming those who have been living on the periphery. And I'm talking the periphery of the economy in this country. I've said it repeatedly, and you'll hear me say it until I have no breath left. We have to modernize, revolutionize ownership patterns in Barbados. That is a principal duty of any government today, to revolutionize ownership patterns in Barbados. The majority of us are still dispossessed. We're still numbered among the poor and the powerless. We have, in my humble submission, Mr. Speaker, to recast the Barbadian image and identity so that our people with confidence can stand up and take their place in this world. The government knows this, but we have to translate the efforts to achieve this into actual initiatives that are meaningful, that people can sense that they're being moved, that they're being improved, and their lot is being better. We have to revolutionize the image of revolutionize the Barbadian image and identity in this today's world. Let us take our faith. And there are those, the odd persons, who are doing that. But that should come almost as a matter of course for us. We have to see ourselves as to who we are. I don't very much like this is who we are. My focus is more so on, my goodness, what we can become, who we ought to be. We need to reshape our institutions for better functionality. Mr. Speaker, you work in the courts, so you know they don't always work well or efficiently in the interests of people. And all across the landscape, institutions that constitute the system that should serve the interests and betterment of the people are found to be dysfunctional. Not totally, but sufficiently dysfunctional as to cause despair and a sense of cynicism and alienation to arise. We need to rebuild the social values platform that they might withstand the currents of modern assaults upon the Barbadian psyche, upon Barbadian value system, upon the Barbadian mindset. And there are many. We're now exposed to the world. There's nothing shielding us from the assaults of the evil currents of this modern world. And our values are put under threat. And we have to rebuild those social values platforms. Mr. Speaker, we have to re-energize the waning spirit of pride and industry that served to construct this nation. We are in danger of losing. Yeah, we stand in danger of losing this nation today, even though we contemplate becoming a republic. But we have to re-energize that waning spirit of pride and industry among our people. When we take this next step, it will still leave us facing certain economic, social, international, and domestic realities, Mr. Speaker. You work at the courts. You will be the first to admit, Mr. Speaker, that there's still a sense of too high a degree of discrimination in the dispense of justice in Barbados. That justice in Barbados is perceived by many not to be necessarily colorblind or class averse or class neutral. And as justice, one of the principal planks of our democratic culture, sense of systems dysfunction to which I've referred. And there's a sense, a growing sense of hopelessness among especially young people, but not only them, among educated people, highly qualified people too, that opportunity will not be found for them here in Barbados. And hence there's a growing attractiveness of foreign fields. It's affecting the young, educated, the highly qualified. The foreign world is becoming more attractive to them because things are wrong in Barbados. And there's not much to suggest that the color will change. With all that we face regionally and globally, Mr. Speaker, We have not yet, as a country, found a formula, either within ourselves or regionally, or in the context wider so of small developing states, to engage the developed world effectively and successfully in matters of trade, capital investment, loan financing, environmental vulnerabilities, developmental inhibitors, or even access to food. And I applaud the Honorable Prime Minister for the stand she's taking on the world stage in bringing these important matters to the attention of the developed world and trying to muster the confidence among developing countries and small vulnerable states such as ours that we may find our niche in this world and that we will be treated with equity and a sense of justice by those who are better off. Republic status for us will constitute a new chapter, Mr. Speaker. There are things we can get wrong and still move on. There are things we can get wrong and still move on. But in my view, we should try as far as possible to make sure we don't get this one wrong. You can sometimes do the right thing in the wrong way. I hear many voices on that side suggesting there's never a wrong time to do the right thing. There's never a wrong time to do the right thing. I've heard that repeatedly from over there. But I caution you that you can sometimes do the right thing in the wrong way. And I would dare to suggest that somebody on that side, if your ears are to the ground, if you sense what I sense, if you feel what I feel, somebody over there should have the courage to say quietly, we need to pause. Or to stand boldly and say, look, we need to stop. We need to stop and make our step forward more certain. Somebody surely over there is strong enough. We're all educated in the same schools. We've all been exposed to the same culture, same values. We relate to the same people. Somebody over there must be hearing what I'm hearing. Somebody over there must be sensing what I'm sensing, fearing what I'm fearing. Somebody over there should be able to stand up and say boldly, look, we need to pause. Or to sit quietly and humbly suggest we need to recheck this before we move forward. Mr. Speaker, that's all I have to say. I support the move to republic, parliamentary republic, non-executive head. I support, when the appropriate time comes, the nominee as the incumbent Governor General for the position of First President of Barbados. I support the process as I know it today as to how we will go about. I support all of these things. I think this is the wrong moment for many reasons for doing it, and I think we've got some legal issues that have to be clarified before we make it. I humbly say that, Mr. Speaker, for your consideration.
Honorable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise, Mr. Speaker, to support this constitutional amendment. It is a very historic moment, I must say, because this has been long overdue. I am not an independence baby by any stretch of the imagination, but having been what I consider a child growing up in politics, I have a certain understanding of the vision, the way in which we must behave, and the targets certainly that we must meet. And I do believe that we have a responsibility to complete what has been started. And that responsibility has fallen certainly on our generation to be able to complete what has been started by the father of our democracy, as well as the father of independence. But, Mr. Speaker, what troubled me from the last speaker, and I know that he has indicated that he has fallen out with me and perhaps would hope that we're going to make up in the future, but what troubles me by the comments of the last speaker is the impression seeking to be conveyed that the time to do this and to pass this particular bill is not now. That for some reason we must wait until the right moment in order to be able to send a message not just to our people but to the rest of the world that we're on a different trajectory, that we want more out of our society than what has been handed down to us from across the shores. He conveys the impression that now is not a good time, that we're in the middle of a pandemic and therefore the public is not ready for what lies ahead in terms of this transformation, despite the fact that we have said that what we are doing here today is simply to make sure that every single Barbadian child, every single Barbadian boy and girl can aspire to become the head of state in this country and does not have to learn in a history lesson or a civics lesson that the head of their Barbados is someone who is part of a colonial past somewhere across the seas, sir. I find it difficult, especially knowing how much we are managing at this point in time in our history, that in the middle of a pandemic would not be the right time for us to prepare the pathway for our people so that when we are in a position where things are better, that we have at least laid the foundation to be able to set in motion our identity, that we set in motion where it is that we want to go, sir. And I get that we've had a history of the past decade where there was almost inertia, where nothing was happening, where nothing was the right time. Even the former prime minister indicated to this country that he wanted to take Barbados into a republic, but on different occasions over the course of the previous time of his tenure, never was able to move the mark, was never able to move the goalpost to be able to take us there, sir. It was simply rhetoric, even though in his bosom and in the bosom of the Democratic Labour Party, they understood that we had to capture the imagination of our people by making sure that we put ourselves in a position where we appreciated that we had to move and to do the things that were necessary to create that identity. You know, I am disturbed by the fact, sir, that the honourable member is also the signatory to not only our manifesto, but he also was the individual who understood at the time that our covenant of hope, in which we spoke, I believe, sir, it was the very first principle that we spoke to, that the Barbados Labour Party stands for strengthening the spiritual and the cultural psyche of Barbadians in a way that enhances honesty and integrity, raises self-awareness, sir, builds confidence and pride, and fosters a sense of industry and responsibility, community and nationalism. The honourable member who just spoke understood that when he was a member of our party, sir. I don't know where this new wisdom has come from, but to behave as though because we are going through a pandemic, that the people are not ready to be taken where they were in 2018 when they voted unanimously for the Barbados Labour Party is misleading. Because we have a responsibility, as we did in 2018, as we do now, to make sure that we take the people where it is that they gave us and vested the confidence in us to take them, sir. And the honourable member would do well to remember to what he signed on to at that point in time, because it wasn't so long ago that he was a member of the Barbados Labour Party with that type of vision. We have spoken, as the Prime Minister said, they've had the Ford Commission, they've had all the commissions. Everybody has pronounced that this is the position that we needed to take as a country to close the gap as to where we were in relation to independence, that we needed to send this signal. And you know, this reminds me of the discussion that we have sometimes on the common entrance. Everybody has written reports, everybody has a position, everybody knows what's not working. But when it comes to touching anything that bears the stamp of the colonial past, all of a sudden we are not sure that we want to let it go. Even though in our heart of hearts we know that we would be all the better for it, because the identity that has been lost from our people is one that we need to give back to our young generation, that they can aspire to be anything that they want to be, even if it is the head of state of this country, or a prime minister, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or a tradesman, or a painter, or a creator. It does not matter.
But what we must not do in the midst of grappling with a pandemic is pretend as though everything has come to a standstill, as though we can no longer push the envelope or to push our people to be the best that they can be, or that we can't put the systems in place to prepare for after the pandemic, for the post-pandemic period, sir. That is not the Labour Party way. It has never been the Labour Party way. And while the Honourable Member and Leader of the Opposition admires the Honourable Prime Minister for speaking truth to power, he then comes and he creates the impression now that in some way we are rushing to do something, that this thing can wait, that he has all these problems with it, even though he supports it. Well, Honourable Member, through you, the Speaker, we will continue to speak truth to power. It is what has allowed us to be able to stand head and shoulders above all the other Caribbean nations, to be able to say enough is enough, to be able to level the playing field and to be able to get Barbados to a point where its voice is heard on the international stage. Because for the last 10 years, when we were taking every single downgrade, Barbados didn't have a say anywhere, whether it was with investors or whether it was anywhere in the international arena, or even amongst our other Caribbean territories, sir. We have had to work grappling and managing this crisis, dealing with the economic crisis, but still trying to make sure that we commit to all of the things that we said we were going to do in relation to uplifting our people. And the Honourable Member talks about us empowering people in relation to housing. Mr. Speaker, let us be fair. We know what we inherited. But we have come week after week with proposals in relation to housing, in relation to those who are investors who have money to be able to spend, to be able to build out housing for our people. We have come with solutions in relation to those who are middle income, the lawyers, the doctors, all of those persons at the middle class. And we have also taken the bold step. We can't do every single house, but we've taken the bold step to be able to deal with those low income earners, to be able to get them as well to get housing, not just in talking about it, sir, but putting things in place to be able to get accommodation for our people here in the shortest time frame, because we understand the social and the economic implications of not being able to do so. So it is not fair, sir, to have to listen to the Honourable Member behave as though, while he supports it, all is wrong with our timing, as if he got a time put down, sir. We don't have a time put down. And whether it is improvements in our healthcare or our education or in our community centers, honourable members on this side are working not just for today, but to plan and to strategize for tomorrow as well. Because we don't believe that we will always be in a pandemic. We don't believe that the tide is always going to be against us. We don't believe that the population will not always be vaccinated. We've set targets, sir, even when it seems as though we've been losing the battle. We've set targets because we want our children back into school. And when they get back to school, we want to be able to teach them that they can become the head of state of this country, Barbados. We want to be able to put them in a position that even as in the Ministry of Education, we're working towards a revised curriculum, that now we have another layer to add to be able to educate our young people, not just about the Cuban Revolution and the Haitian Revolution, but we can talk about our own Barbados Revolution, where we completed the course of history. And we're going to talk about moving towards the state of being a republic and being able to have the participation fully of our people in being able to change our constitution so that it is relevant for the next decade, sir. That is what we are working towards. So when you see Nelson come down, whether you know where Nelson is, he came down under this administration, sir. When others talked about it, we brought him down. And the honourable member was there with us when that came down, and it was an emotional period for all of us who were able to witness it. And when we said that the people of Barbados would get the opportunity to choose and to be able to participate in whether what they wanted to see in the centre of Bridgetown, the representations are being made, sir, but it's not an overnight process. The submissions are being made. And all views matter in terms of what replaces the structure that was there, sir. When we moved towards national honors and started to do away with the Queen's honors, sir, that was also a process which we were doing in the middle of a pandemic because we understood what our journey was, and we have never stepped aside from that understanding of what the journey is. Because, I grew up in a time, sir, when, everybody talked about waiting for the Queen's honors, the list. Everybody wanted to be sir and lady. Everybody wanted the title to come from England, as though it was manna from heaven. And you grew up as a child believing that you couldn't be anything unless you had this title behind your name and your name appeared in a newspaper, sir. But the truth of the matter is that we understand as the next generation that those titles mean nothing. What has to mean something is the contribution of each and every one of us that we make to our country and we make to our society and our community. That's what we need to be teaching our children. Not that we have to retain a head of state that does not look like us, does not sound like us, does not eat like us. We have come to a point in our history where we understand that we respect others, we understand our journey, but we also have a responsibility at this point in time to empower our people, to engage with our people in a more meaningful way. This administration can never be accused of not consulting. We have consulted more than any other administration in the history of this country. People's assemblies, rubbing shoulders, the Thorn Commission. We have consulted and consulted. And there are times when I say to the Honorable Prime Minister, we are consulting too much. And because that's how it feels. But we know in our bosom that views matter. And that those things that we may believe are the way things are supposed to be done, that sometimes when you step back and you listen to other contending views, you may be able to pause, sir, and recognize that some of those views matter and can be filtered into the discussion. We also have brought vending legislation, sir, which now is before the Joint Select Committee, empowering our people even further. People who the honourable member would have rubbed shoulders with us from time to time prior to the last election and understands, no doubt, the importance of this type of legislation. So to give the impression that we are not doing anything for the poor people of this country, sir, is misleading. And the honourable member needs to behave himself. He needs to behave himself. Because the truth of the matter, sir, is we have been working hard. And while we bring this piece of legislation here today, and there's been all of this controversy and all of these different views contending, we've listened. We have listened. And we have done so in a way that we intend that the Constitution will have the benefit of being able to have the input of the people of Barbados, including the leader of the same opposition, sir. So he does not have to worry that this administration is off on a frolic of its own. We have completed the course, and I'm pretty sure if he talks with the former Prime Minister, he will be happy to know that this day has eventually come. You know, you can't just oppose, sir, just simply for being in opposition. You have to be constructive as well in the things in which you attack the government for, sir. And in fairness, this bill is brought here today to empower, to uplift, to enlighten, and to let people know that we control our destiny. You know, when I talk about the honors, we've been doing that. We've talked about the fact that we've removed Nelson. But we went further, sir. We talked about the National Transformation Initiative as well. Because in the process of us getting to this point and going further in terms of amendments to the Constitution, we understand that it's not just about changing the name or the title. It is also about changing mindsets. That if you are going to prepare people to be a new generation of citizens, you have to create the framework in which you start the process from now to get them to understand the type of citizen that they must be and the type of Barbados in which we all want to live, sir. So it isn't by chance that there's a charter that has been circulated to the people of this country for their input, including the honourable member. It isn't by chance, sir, that they are able to participate in who they are and identifying who they are and being able to say to this administration what changes they may want to see reflected in the charter. Sir, we have started a journey of making sure that our people are able to do citizenship modules. That is not by chance. It is a recognition that in many cases people don't even know who they are or what they want to be or what their place is or station in this world. We didn't start that by chance. We started it because we understood the challenges that we are seeing confronting our country in relation to especially our young people not understanding what they are to do when they become an adult, what is expected of them, sir. We also understood that there were people who were in various forms of employment, whether the hotel sector or other sectors who had been affected by the pandemic as well, who needed, in a sense, some grounding, a refresher course to better understand their station in life, to connect the dots as to who they are and what they can offer to this country, so that it isn't just about what has been happening over the last couple of decades where we just prepare people for a job, but rather that we prepare people to be entrepreneurs. We prepare people to understand that if I do something and I do something wrong, it impacts on my brother, it impacts on my neighbor, it impacts on my sister. We can't just teach people to just get certificates anymore, sir. We have to make sure that in getting the certification, that people understand that there are also some responsibilities as well that come with their ability to be able to acquire certain certifications, sir. And that is where we are. So, sir, I really, didn't intend to come in at this juncture, but I believe that it is necessary because I don't want the last words as we go to our diet for lunch are the words of the Honorable Leader of the Opposition. I will not be able to have a good luncheon, period, sir. I won't allow those misleading words to be uttered from the Honorable Member's lips. Sir, I am going to close on this. We have spent considerable time focusing on getting to this point of bringing this particular bill. But in all of the things that we've been doing, we've also been trying to center Barbados' relationship with the rest of the world and with the rest of the region. Because we understand that the words of Errol Barrow mean something, that we must be satellites of all, friends of all and satellites of none, sir. That we must live in a Barbados where we are proud of who we are, that we can stand on any world stage and speak truth to power, sir. That is what our mission is. And I say to you, through Speaker, to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, you don't have to worry about Barrow's legacy, the very excellent Errol Walton Barrow's legacy, because the Barbados Labour Party has always told the story. Whether the story is a good story or a bad story, we've told the story. Perhaps we've not told enough of the story. But we don't have to worry about how we immortalize his legacy. His legacy will not be forgotten by a Barbados Labour Party. It might be forgotten by a Democratic Labour Party administration, who has, anyway, let me stop there, sir. Let me stop there. History will speak for itself. And because it is not us you must worry about, sir, the legacy of Errol Barrow has already been eroded by his own party in relation to education in this country, and it has been restored by a Barbados Labour Party administration. So, sir, this place is where the record is set straight. And so, sir, I want to support this bill. I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for her leadership and for the Cabinet of Barbados in being able to get us to this point. It is, for me, a historic occasion to be a member of a parliament that is able to take us from where we are to where we must go, and to be able to lead by example in setting a foundation for our people, so every child in this country has something to aspire to, sir. For those few words, sir, I am obliged, and I would ask that this honourable House be adjourned until 3 p.m. Suspended, sir, suspended.
Until honourable member, the question is that this honourable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chamber stands suspended until 3 p.m.